we really wanted to take people into Facebook, there are incredibly consequential decisions that are made within that company. And I think readers, users have rarely gotten a feeling of what the rooms look like in which those decisions were made. Ultimately, we're talking about a very small group of people, at times just a dozen people, that make decisions that impact people all over the world.
We really thought that the public was getting some sort of indication of the problems with Facebook. They were hearing about scandal after scandal, apology after apology, promises to do better after better. They're seeing that pattern. But we thought it was really important to connect all of the dots and explain that there are some really core systemic things that have to do with Facebook's business model and the technology, the business model that really profits from attention for advertisers to target ads, as well as a business model that amplifies content to get you to stay on longer and longer.
Facebook keeps you online as much as possible by making sure to surface the most emotive content to the top of your newsfeed. And what I mean by that is things that make you happy, that make you sad, that anger you, that frustrate you. That's going to be what you see when you first log on. Because even if that top post is something you really disagree with, you're probably going to click on it. You're going to linger on it a little bit longer. Maybe you'll add, an angry face emoji. Their systems read all of that as engagement, and therefore they learn about you. And I think one thing that surprised even Cecilia and I when we were reporting this book is just how much Facebook knows about you. They have the ability to even do predictive technology to try and figure out what you're going to do next in life. Are you a person who's likely to buy a house or buy a boat? Are you thinking about getting married? Facebook doesn't need to listen to your conversations because it already knows so much about you. So if you're speaking to a friend about a vacation in Hawaii, it may not be that you went and searched Hawaii in your phone, but if your friend did that, if your friend walked away and then Googled, best hotels in Hawaii, or your friend's husband did that, or anyone in her physical location, Facebook knows you were probably having a conversation about that. And I think that's important to imagine in your mind when you picture what Facebook knows about you. Imagine a map, a physical map of your home, of your world. Facebook can see all those interactions. And so it doesn't need to listen in on your microphone. It can listen in on your conversations just by that sort of extended network.
So many people talk to us, current and former employees, because they really wanted for us and the public to know what was really happening within Facebook. They were seeing a version of the company that was presented by the company itself in its very polished talking points and its army of 200 plus PR officials. That was just not ringing true to what they understood what was happening. They wanted the truth to come out. And we found that over and over, a lot of the decision-making process was happening by one person in particular, Mark Zuckerberg. And we showed that pattern within the book.
Something we've learned about Mark Zuckerberg in this reporting process is that he's very, very driven by his own ambitions. He wants to continue to be the largest social media company in the world. He wants history to remember him as that. And I think if you consider that to be his starting point, all his decisions down the line make sense. If he wanted to grow into as many markets as possible, he really couldn't be thinking about safety and privacy in the way that some, government regulators perhaps hoped he was. And I think that when Facebook made the decision to become this global empire, right, to put the next billion people online, there weren't those people in the room that were perhaps checking those ambitions and saying, can we do this responsibly?
They believe so strongly in what they think of as of this very noble goal of connecting the world. So yes, that does come first. And that's actually where the title of our book came, which is called An Ugly Truth. It comes from a memo written by a vice president at Facebook, Andrew Bosworth, where he basically outlined what that calculus was, that connecting the world was so important to Facebook that there would be collateral damage. He even says there could be, say, terrorist attacks that lead to death that happen because of information on the platform. There could be bullying on the platform that leads to a lot of harms. But they believe so strongly in connecting people in growth that they're willing to absorb that collateral damage.
You were supposed to testify, but you had kind of a testy exchange with Maxine Waters when you were up on Capitol Hill or somewhere. Can you tell us what happened and why you're not testifying?
So we have a lot of respect for Maxine Waters for the work we've done, and we work really closely with her committee. It was her choice to have Mark testify, and that's obviously something we respect.
But what happened? What happened between you guys?
Let me just answer the question if you don't mind.
One thing we did learn about Cheryl Sandberg, especially after your interview with her, Katie, at Vanity Fair, is that her reaction to that interview, which was tough, and was that she was shocked. And I think that she was shocked and told her staff that she was dismayed that she was being asked such tough questions that were very pertinent questions. And that showed a few things to us. It showed to us that there's still a level of defensiveness that she holds. And we hear that a lot about her when it comes to the reaction and the criticism that Facebook has over Cambridge Analytica, misinformation, one thing after another, that oftentimes her response is, we're so unfairly being targeted by the media. They're jealous of our business model, all kinds of things. And number two, we heard that from her, people around her, that she was dismayed as well because she thought that she was in a friendly environment. And one thing that we show is actually that was very surprising for us in reporting this book is that sometimes Cheryl Sandberg does not have the great political or social instincts that she is touted to have. But we had heard over and over from regulators that when they met with her, they were sort of confused at how she was trying to personalize relationships when Facebook was under investigation.
One of the things we did in the book is really examine Mark and Cheryl's relationship. And imagine it almost as a marriage. Like in the beginning, they both come in and they need something from the other person. They fulfill something that the other person wants and needs. Mark doesn't want to deal with Washington. He doesn't want to deal with policy. And Cheryl is very, very good at all those things. Cheryl, on the other hand, wants to leave Google. She wants to become a more powerful executive. She's hit a bit of a ceiling. And so initially they have this really, I think, equal-footed partnership. And she really is a strong number two in the company. As the book goes on, you see her, I think one executive sort of sums it up perfectly. It goes from being a number one and a number two to being a number one and then a many. A lot of her responsibilities at the company are taken away from her, both by Mark and by new people that are brought in. And ultimately, her decision-making ability is called into question in this book. Our reporting shows that Mark Zuckerberg often doesn't listen to Cheryl Sandberg's advice.
I think right now, Facebook is confronted with its biggest problem, and that is misinformation around COVID and the COVID vaccines. It's an enormous problem, and Facebook does not have its hands completely around that problem. And the reason why is twofold, I think, at least twofold. Number one, they haven't even tried to amass and survey how big the problem is. They are just not even collecting data that the Biden administration actually wants for them to collect, which is prevalence data. How big is the problem of misinformation on vaccines right now on Facebook? They don't collect that data. And the Biden administration is saying it's crazy that you don't even have a grasp of how big the problem is. And number two, I think really important, this current episode that deals with misinformation on vaccines is actually connected to a broader systemic problem that has to do with their incentive model and their drive for growth. And until the company really examines how they can look at the business model and the technology that feeds into the business model that has created so many of these problems like misinformation, then I think that they're not assessing the full scope of the problem.
I think Facebook is in some ways already maybe too big to fail, but really it's the ideas they introduced into our world that are too big to fail. It's the technology. Even if Facebook were to decide tomorrow to break itself up, let's say Mark Zuckerberg had a change of heart and he said, it's too much. I was irresponsible. I'm not the one to lead this company anymore. I'm going to break my own company up. Another company would step in the next day and take over and become the new Facebook. They've introduced a problem to society. And as a $1 trillion company, they're probably the only ones that can fix it.